Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second devlog. I can see that I don't remember any one of you from the first one, so welcome. It's nice to see new faces. And yeah, let's have a nice evening. I'll start off with my presentation. So my name is Mžourack. I'm a part of Noise.kitchen, and I make Mžourack modular synthesizers. And I have a new one coming out, or, well, it's in a very early stage right now. It's called Rain, and it's what I'm going to be talking about today. Flashback, but you weren't here. This is the thing I was talking about last time, which is called Diktat. And the last time I showed it, it's a product, or it's a thing that's very near completion. So I showed it in a very late stage of development. Basically, right now, I had a couple of people beta test it, and they gave me a lot of really good feedback. But it also means I basically have to write the software from scratch, because they had some really good suggestions. Vitek here as well. But yeah, they kind of ruined everything I've done so far. So I'll have to rewrite that. But yeah, I'm happy about it. And what I'm talking about today is actually at the other end of the development cycle. This is very near completion, but Rain is actually very early in development. Here you can kind of see where I was at 1 month ago. It was just a sketch in my notebook, and this event is really good because it forces me to do stuff. So this was where it was at 1 month ago, and now I have just today the physical units arrived. So that's pretty cool. So here you can see just the first initial sketches of it. Here you can see me trying to test some of the concepts out on a breadboard, trying the basic stuff if it's worth making or not. That's a very early render of the front panel. Now I'll show you a bit of context into why I'm developing it. So I had the Diktat, and after Diktat, I had a very big, complex thing planned. And as I was developing it was taking very long, and I kind of got fatigued. And I kind of decided that before I take on a very big, complex project, I'll probably want to do a bit of palette cleansing and do something much simpler, something I can do much faster. But also I realized that at the new thing that I want to work on, there's a lot of stuff that I've never done before. So I kind of put this project together to learn a lot of stuff, which I'll reuse there. But I won't get if I started with that one, I would probably never finish it, or I would get stuck at so many stages. So I decided, let's take those things and just try them out on something else. And that something else is Rain. Here's kind of the concept of the module described. So the idea is you'll have rain falling down these 4 columns, and we'll get triggers coming out from these jacks over here. Here you can kind of see it that's the column, just me testing that on a breadboard. The idea is we'll have 4 of these columns where rain happens. They will mostly be random signals coming out of them, or random triggers, because it's supposed to be kind of like the rain. There's going to be a second mode, which is kind of changes that around and puts some more order into it, with a mode that you can actually clock externally and have it react to stuff that's already happening. But the main idea is the rain, the random trigger generator. It's going to be affected by 2 parameters. One of them is density, so you can kind of see me playing around with that over here, where if I'm increasing that value, I get more rain. There's more chance of raindrops falling. And the other parameter is tilt, which is not shown here because it wouldn't work with a single column. The tilt parameter should shift the rain to one side or the other. And the idea is that you'll be able to kind of, for example, put this in stereo space and play around with the whole stereo field. And that's the tilt parameter. There's also a CV section, or a part of it that instead of just getting triggers, we'll get some continuous voltage, some stepped voltage. The behavior of this stepped voltage will be very dependent on where the rain is happening. So an example of this would be that we could have the stepped voltage tied to the pitch of something. And on the left side, when it's raining on the left side, we'll get lower pitches. On the right side, we'll get higher pitches. You'll be able to set that by holding the CV button and playing around with the knobs. Yeah, that will be the CV out section, and that's it. That's the concept. The concept. That's the whole concept of it. And so I said that I'll probably try to learn a lot of things here before I move on to the more complicated thing. And that's basically what this presentation is about. I want to show you a bit about these 5 points, which I've done for the first time on this thing. And yeah, made me learn a lot. So the first one is using a new microcontroller. A microcontroller is like a tiny chip that has a whole computer on it. Very, very simplified, but it's what makes these digital things work. It's the heart of it. It's what you have to write your code for. It's what manages everything that's going on. The other thing is using a DAC, or a digital to analog converter. We'll talk more about that. Another thing is a transparent front panel with light guides, front side components, and digital dimming. We'll walk through all of those. So the first thing is using the new microcontroller. So when you're looking at microcontrollers online, and you're looking at like the specs of each of the chip, if you're not very much into it already, like all the parameters, they'll probably tell you like nothing. You're gonna see that this number is bigger than this one. Is that a good thing or not? You're not really sure. So here it kind of summarizes, I think, like what's important for like the average like tinker or somebody who's doing stuff at home. So you may know the Atmega 328P. It's used on the original Arduino boards. It's something like most people going into electronics get in contact with very early. The RP2040 is a much newer thing, much more powerful, very well documented, but kind of a lot harder to get into. The price, I think, is like $1 versus $2. Obviously, that's a different number, but I think what it says is that they're both very cheap. I don't think a price is, for somebody like me, $1 versus $2 is the same thing. It's not a really big difference. Yeah, like I said, Atmega, way easier to get into. And you can start playing with either of these by getting either of these boards. So these are the Arduinos, Nanos, and Unos. They're all over the place. Same thing with the Raspberry Pico Pi. You can get this board for like 100 Czech crowns and play around with this chip. And here's just like on the first module I showed from last time on the Diktat, it's over here. That's the Atmega. And on the RP2040, yeah, the RP2040 goes over there on RAIN. Getting a little bit deeper into this, like the Atmega is way older. I was actually surprised researching this presentation is that it's now 17 years old. I had no clue it's that old. It was probably much more expensive back then. While as the RP2040 was released just recently, 3 years ago. So that kind of dictates the differences between them. The RP2040 is just a much more modern, advanced thing. The Atmega is kind of manageable to work with, right? So like you can see that the chips are basically the same size. But on the Atmega, we have 8 pins on one side, whereas on the RP2040, it's like 18 or 16 or something like that. So we've got 0.8 millimeters between the pins here and 0.4 between those. It's kind of a big deal in the end, even though like I get these pre-soldered in China. If something doesn't work, I can probably do a lot of nasty things to this guy and make him work. Whereas I'm not really able to do anything with that. It's just so tiny. This thing has internal memory on it, while that thing doesn't. It just makes it a little bit more intimidating. Basically means that this thing needs an extra chip next to it that holds all the data. And like when I saw it for the first time, I was kind of intimidated by that because, yeah, it's just more complicated stuff that I might not even understand in the end, but it's there. On the other hand, the Atmega doesn't support USB, while that thing does support it natively. So if you want USB support here, you're going to have to add an extra chip as well. A big deal for me as a Mžourack guy, somebody who makes modular synths, is that the Atmega is powered by +5 volts, and that thing is powered by 3.3. The thing that's not nice about that is that a lot of Mžourack signals, they move between 0 to 5 volts, which means that it's perfect for Mžourack. Whereas 3.3 is not really anything, and you're gonna have to add 5 volts to your circuit anyway. So you're probably gonna have like 2 power supplies on your board, one with 3.3 volts and one with 5 volts, and it's harder to route. It's harder to work with. This thing is much slower than the RP2040, but the faster speeds at which it runs at, it kind of makes a lot of new problems. One of the things that I didn't have to worry about here at all with the Atmega was something called debouncing, which is basically when you press a button, 2 metal plates come into contact, and while you can't really see it yourself, the plates don't just go. They actually go, right? So they're gonna for a fraction of a second, there's gonna be some bouncing, and what actually happens is when you press a button, this thing interprets it like 10 different, 10 individual pushes, and this thing doesn't. And you can treat that in software. You can go after you read something, don't read anything for a millisecond or whatever. So it just adds a bit more complexity to the project. Nothing major, but it's one of the things that makes faster processors harder to work with, because all these things that are happening at a time scale we are not really able to see, they're gonna start becoming a problem, because there's events happening in very short times that usually you don't have to care about, but with things this fast, it starts being a problem. And this is probably not so fast. There's a lot more powerful stuff out there that's way faster. There's 130 times more RAM. That's a huge deal, because when I was coding, I started hitting the ceiling here pretty easily. This 264 kilobytes feels like infinity right now. I'll probably find out it's not very soon, because when you get more power, you usually start to just being more gluttonous with your with the things you're doing with it. But yeah, it's a massive difference. And again, like I said, if you want to get into this kind of stuff, like developing hardware, start here. It's way easier to get into. Move there once you've done your first project and you're comfortable with going into this stuff, because it's a bit more laborious to get into this, whereas this is just so well described online and very easy to get going with. Oh, and some exciting news that's just very recent, bit of an ad, but I don't work for them. The company that made the RP2040 just a couple of months ago announced a new one, a sequel. And again, you can look at the numbers, what's the difference, and you'll not be able to really tell what the difference is. But there's one really big deal. It's called single precision floating point on hardware level, which essentially means this thing should be really powerful or ready for audio work, whereas the old one wasn't. So this thing is now you can get the Pico 2, which features this chip, for 135 Czech crowns on some random online store I found, and you can get you can start working with developing digital audio stuff on its own hardware very cheaply at home. So you buy this, you get a USB cable, you can start coding for it. Yeah, the next thing that I had to learn or did for the first time was using a DAC. A DAC is a digital to analog converter. What it basically means is that it's some kind of a component that takes in ones and zeros, but it can output something between those values. It can output a continuous voltage, not just a low or a high. And yeah, I've been doing that for the first time, and I didn't really know where to start. So the way I approached it was, I was thinking that what I need is probably not something super precise. I'm making a thing that does randomness, basically. So I don't really care about precision that much. I also don't want it to do audio. I'm just using it for slowly moving signals. So that's off the table, because I know there's a big difference whether you're doing audio stuff or not. You need way more speed for audio stuff. Well, as for something moving slowly, you can avoid that. So that's kind of those are my parameters. I don't need to do audio. I want it to be cheap. I want it to be something well described and high quality. So I was just looking at big brands and their entry-level DAC stuff. And this is kind of the stuff I was that was showing up for me online. So this, for example, is the MCP4728, Over there, you can see it. It's tiny. It's just that chip on that black board over there. That's it. And that's just a small board that I ordered online and used it at home and tried developing for this. I had a good time with it. These are some of the parameters that have that are important with the DAC. So, for example, this one, it says that it's 12-bit. What does that mean? It means it can output any of 2 to the power of 12 different values. So it can do, so let's say it's powered by 3.3 volts. It can do 4,096 steps between 0 volts and 3.3 volts. So that's like the resolution of the output we have. It's 4-channel. That means, or it says it's 4-channel. That means that it can actually do 4 of these outputs independently, which is really cool for the price. I thought that for something with 4 channels, I would have to pay a lot more. But yeah, really cheap, a 70 Czech crown chip. And I just need one for right now. So 4 is good enough for me. But then most of these things also said these 3 letters. They said I2C, or it should be read I2C. And I had no clue what that is. But like all of these DACs had that next to their name. So I decided that I'll probably have to learn about it. So I opened the wiki, and it was just like very technical and kind of hard to get into, and I didn't understand that much. Or it looked like there's way more information than what I need. And then I started getting like really weird YouTube recommendations, like bit banging it old school and I2C bit banged, and yeah. So after I went through this rabbit hole, I finally understood what it's really about. So all it really is it's the rule set that makes this possible. It's what allows various electronic devices to communicate between each other. Yeah, and like I said, most of the devices I found showed that they support I2C, so I thought I should learn it. And here it's shown like very simply how it works. So here's like what you need on the hardware side. You just need your microcontroller, your computer, and just 2 wires coming out of it. And onto these 2 wires, you can hook up devices that support I2C. And what's really cool about it is you can basically hook up as many as you want. There is a limit. There is definitely a limit, but you'll probably not reach it. So you can just use 2 pins on this and keep adding stuff to it, which was, as somebody who didn't know it before, even though it's a very old concept, it was kind of mind-blowing to me that this works. Here it's kind of explained like what actually happens. So there's like 3 steps to it. Like each of the devices has some kind of an address, and they know their addresses. And then the master device, it like shouts an address down these 2 lines. And the device that has that address acknowledges it, and it's like, hey, yeah, that's me. And what it does is it sends back a 1 down that line. So the microcontroller shouts in an address and gets a 1 back. That tells it that something knows that it's being called. And then this thing knows that something is listening. And it sends down the rest of the instructions down the line. And only the device that knows it should be listening performs that instruction. And I think that's pretty genius. It's like from the 80s, so it's nothing new, but it's really cool that it works. I have to say that I was getting it to work for like 4 days before it started working, 3 or 4 days. It's not really interesting why it didn't work. It was all software side. It was like my computer didn't have the libraries in the correct format to be able to tell this chip to do this kind of stuff. Not really interesting. But finally, when I got it working, and I was like always looking at my oscilloscope, and I finally got that like device like send that 1 back saying like, I'm here. That was a really good moment. The next thing I'm trying out is the transparent front panel with light guides. So here you can see my older module called Pebbles. And the way it works here is we have like the backboard of it. Then there's like an LED with these 2 pins sticking through the front panel, and it's showing up on the front. While as, for example, Bastl does this thing where the panel is transparent, and you can, and I like kind of tight layups or like layouts of the front panel. And I realized that this is the way to like cram more information there, and it just looks very sexy. So I thought that's something I want to do. So I started looking into it. Yeah, here's just the idea. So instead of having like a board, through LEDs and a front panel, we have these tiny, tiny SMD LEDs that are soldered onto the board directly there on the surface. Then we have to add some kind of light guide, some kind of a physical thing that will or guide the light to the space where it's supposed to be. So that's about how it's going to look for this module. And then there's the front panel. And the really cool thing about this is these tiny devices, these SMD devices, they're way easier for machines to solder. So let's look at this thing. There's 8 jacks, 2 potentiometers, and a button, and then 40 LEDs. And if these are pre-soldered for me at the factory, then I don't have to solder 80 pins on my device, and I can build it much faster. So that was also a big deal for me, that it will reduce a lot of the work I have to do manually when making these things. But there was kind of a lot of things that I wasn't sure about. So what I did was I ordered this prototype where a lot of the things I was unsure about come in different shapes and sizes. So one thing is that, so it's called rain. The LEDs obviously have to be blue. And I looked up different blue LEDs, and I put in a different, that's why they're different sizes as well. These are the LEDs, and they're all a different part number. They should theoretically be a different shape of blue or a different shade of blue. So I want to try out which looks the best. Another thing is they're each coupled with a resistor of a different value in each row. So here we have different shades of blue, and in this direction we have different brightnesses. And also, like the see-through windows on the panel, maybe that's bothering you for this whole presentation, that they're different sizes. That's just on this prototype. I want to check if it looks better with small ones or bigger ones. But in the end, it's all going to be the same window size, the same LED, and the same brightness. I just want like a sampler to check out how it's going to look like. Another thing I did for the first time is something called, or I call it here, digital dimming. I don't think I should go too deep into it, but basically there's something called PVM, which you maybe know, which allows you to control brightness. It's a situation where you can only turn a light on or off. So how do you make it different brightness than just fully bright or off? You turn it on and off super fast and vary how much of this. So let's say this is like 1 millisecond, and we're going to vary like how much of the 1 millisecond is going to be lit up or unlit, and this changes the brightness, which is really easy to do with these microcontrollers because they usually support it natively. It's already a feature there, so that's not that special. But what I have here is shift registers. Don't want to go too deep into it because I basically had my whole presentation about it last time. But with the shift registers, using this feature is not possible anymore. So I had to implement this on the software level, and yeah, I found out that it totally works. It's fast enough to do that. And you can see that happening over here, where there's a ghosting effect behind the LED that's actually done digitally, because when the raindrop is at that position, it's just on. But once it leaves that, it slowly fades away from that. So that's done on a software level, and it works. So happy about that. And finally, this is tied also to the fact that I have these LEDs on the front. Whenever I designed a module before, like Pebbles here, I always had the components on the back side. So on the front side of the component board, you would have the pots, LEDs, switches, stuff like that. While as all the circuitry, the stuff the user doesn't really have to see, is on the back, which gives you a lot of space to work with. But here, because I was using the LEDs on the front side, I needed all the components on the front side. And so this is the board with all the components, and this is the module, and this is where the jacks are. So all of this space is gone. I can't use it. Where the LEDs are, obviously, I can't use those either. where the pots are, I can't put anything there either, and where the switch is, nothing either. So the non-red space is basically what you're left with. So very little space to work with. And I had to go back and forth between like how the front panel is gonna look and if I can fit the circuit there. No, I can't. Redo the front panel, go back and forth until I found a way to fit it all in there. And it turned out to be a lot of components. This is the schematic. It turned out to be way more than I thought. And yeah, like this area, it was a long day, which was very hard to do, but I fit it all in there in the end. So where is it? Well, I was hoping I would be able to show it today, but it arrived today. So it's here now, and I don't know if it works yet because I didn't have chance to test it yet. But now I have the board and the front panel, and I think this is going to be a nice weekend. So that's Rain. That's it for me. So if you have any questions, I think I'll put it back here. Oh wait, I should give you a microphone.
Is there some why is it Rain? Like, because like I understand it's like for a random trigger generators, but like do the raindrops like accelerate or collide when you add some of the wind or tilt or how you call it?
There is not collision. That's a good idea. But yeah, I did play around with like the physics of it. So it's definitely happening. Let's face it, it is a bit of a gimmick, definitely. Like I know where you're aiming, but yeah, it was kind of like I wanted to test all these things out in something, and this kind of seemed perfect. So yeah, you can definitely shrink this and like just remove the visual aspect of it completely. But I think it will be kind of a part of it's gonna like the visual side of this will be a feature of it as well. And the main idea for me, like how I would use it, is take something in your rack that you're already using, some kind of a voice that accepts some kind of CV and triggers. And I think this will just make it like, this is a new way to play it, basically. I think you'll be able to like go into completely different spaces than you were with traditional sequencing techniques. This will be a bit different, a bit more experimental. And I want to do like snare showers. That's my thing. Yeah. Okay, so thank you for your attention. That was Rain. That was all the questions as well. If you want to chat about it later, we can. But now I'll set the stage for the next presentation,